and that's going to be respond. Respond to the gifts that God gives. So if we meet the Lord and he speaks to us, then that will elicit a response. It may lead us back to telling him more things, to relating more things to him in our prayer. Remember, this is the thing, is that we don't just do this. We don't do acknowledge, and then we do relate, and then we do receive, and then we do respond. They can be in different orders within our prayer. They don't have to be one after another. Sometimes in our prayer, maybe we spend most of our time doing one, and we don't spend most of our time doing one of the others. But with respond, what is God asking of me? What is he calling me to do? Now that I have met him, if we truly meet God in prayer, it affects us. It changes us. It should end by some kind of resolution, some concrete thing that we're going to do. It may be asking God to help us in a specific way. It may be the thanking, him at the end of the time of prayer. If we don't really know how to respond, well, then we further relate that to the Lord. We tell him, Jesus, I don't know exactly yet what you want of me. I'm open. I want to do your will. Help me to understand in a greater way. Sometimes it might be, I remember this was a kind of response when I was going through my vocational discernment was, Jesus, I think you want me to be a priest, and if you did, and so that's what I'm going to assume. And if you don't want me to, I need you to make it clear, because otherwise I'm going to go off of that assumption. So our responding to the Lord. So from this time of prayer for a moment or so, just back into some silence, and now speak again to Jesus with a response to him. And it may just be, thanking him for this time, or maybe something's been stirring in your heart as to, I want you to move practically in this direction, maybe with, reaching out to this individual or whatever it might be. We'll finish up with some final clarification points with regard to respond. Once again, in your prayer, each of these different habits may take more or less time depending upon, the kind of time you have for prayer. And with regard to responding, our belief must lead us to action. It is an obedience of faith. It's talked about in the scriptures. Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. Right? So there needs to be action and change in our life. Discipleship depends on the desire not only to seek, but also then to do God's will once we have found it. St. Francis de Sales says that with regard to times of meditation, good movements of prayer must lead you to deliberate decisions, precise and particular for your correction and improvement. Right? So that C.S. Lewis in his Screwtape Letters, which is a very interesting reflection upon the tactics of the enemy. It's basically, he wrote it as like a dialogue between a lower down demon and his superior. The superior is explaining to the underling demon of how to bring about people's demise, and he says that to direct the malice to his immediate neighbors, so direct all of his anger and malice and hatred towards his immediate neighbors, whom he meets every day, and to thrust his benevolence out to the remote circumference, to people he does not know. The malice thus becomes wholly real, and the benevolence largely imaginary. All sorts of virtues painted in the fantasy or approved by the intellect, or even to some measure loved and admired, will not keep a man from our Father's house, meaning hell. Indeed, they may make him more amusing when he gets here. So what he's saying there is try to convince him to really love the virtues in a theoretical way. I really love humility, but I'm not actually humble. I really love the virtue of charity towards those theoretical people over there, but I absolutely am awful to my immediate family, right? He says that's how we lead them to destruction. They're thinking about all these nice things, but only in a theoretical fashion, but to who they're actually interacting with, they're actually living in vice, right? And that leads someone to eternal damnation, if you can convince them of that. So that's why it's important. That's why the saints will say the opposite, is that if we're going to be thinking good thoughts, they need to lead us to good actions, to actually, to the way that we're actually living. So, in conclusion, just throw up some reflection questions that you can use later today. We're right at lunchtime, so we're going to stop here and say a prayer and have our lunch, but I'll leave that kind of up here for you guys to look at and reflect upon